Hello and welcome to the special show. Urjit Patel will, of course, be the next man in charge as far as Mint Street is concerned. What is it that we can expect from Urjit Patel, who's got very solid credentials? What are the challenges that lie ahead for him? And more importantly, what sort of an innings will he have at the RBI given his background and the macroeconomic scenario that rests before us? Who better than the three expert voices that are joining us on this edition of the show? We've got Bimal Jalan, former RBI governor. We also have Ajay Kanwal, regional chief executive of ASEAN and South Asia at Standard Chartered, and of course Sunit Kant Munjal, who is joint managing director and CEO at Hero Corporate Services. Thank you, each one of you, for being with us. This is a big appointment. It was in the making for a long time, and the government did take its time, but voted in favor of continuity there. Ajay Kanwal, let's start with you, because you're not just a banker, but a global investor as well, and you have the liberty of being objective on India, being a global insider. How does this continuity at RBI really impact people like yourselves? Does continuity actually matter?
So thanks, Supriya. I think clearly with the governor's appointment, two things are very clear. I think when you look at India outside in, clearly a impact of confidence is visible. So the new appointment has brought confidence, or rather I should say has sustained the confidence. And second is continuity obviously is a very important factor, saying things will continue to be as good or better than they were in the past. So both things are real.
Mr. Munjal, the fact that Mr. Kanwal was saying that continuity is good, continuity is always warranted, but this continuity also signals that there is a broad validation of what the RBI has done up until now. Do you agree?
I think probably yes. So one good thing I think is continuity of policy is always welcomed by economists, by industry, by rating agencies in general. And the statements coming now from the experts both within and outside the countries that this is a smart, sensible and a good move. I do think, however, while he is the one who helped design this policy, the monetary policy, etc., and also the one to target inflation as the primary objective of RBI, because of his background both as a consultant and from industry, I think he would find it easier to strike a balance on both sides, which is the industry and the government's requirement to moderate interest rates and at the same time to keep a sharp enough focus so that inflation doesn't run away.
We're going to just talk about inflation a bit, because I do want to dedicate some amount of time talking about that, since Urjit Patel's reputation precedes him as far as inflation is concerned. But Dr. Bimal Jalan, you've been in the hot seat and you managed the Asian crisis. Let's just talk about very recently. In 2013, when Rajan did come into office, rupee was in a free fall. There was a double-digit inflation that we were staring at. There was almost trial by fire, but the macroeconomic scenario looks a lot stable today. Given that there will be no trial by fire as far as Dr. Patel is concerned, what do you believe should be his immediate priorities? And I'm asking you to wear your former RBI governor's hat at this point in time.
No, I mean, he has the experience of RBI, having worked in the RBI for quite some time, as well as of the economy, Indian economy. So, and he has worked elsewhere also. So he's a very competent, experienced person. And I'm sure that he would take account of what needs to be done. Obviously, both RBI and the government have to work together, because there is monetary policy, there is fiscal policy, there is the macroeconomic outlook, and all of us want relatively low inflation with relatively high growth. There is always a trade-off between the two, and I'm sure that he will strike a balance.
It's important to remember here that Dr. Jalan is actually throwing his weight behind the growth lobby. Wonder if you would have liked the growth wallahs to have told you that when you were the RBI governor. But Ajay Kanwal, I'm going to pose the same question to you. It's one thing for the RBI, a former RBI governor, to say so, and it's another from an investor's point of view. There is no immediate crisis that we are staring at. We're not pushed to a wall as far as the macroeconomy is concerned. CAD is under control. The fisc is under control. Inflation is largely reined in. There isn't going to be a trial by fire. What do you then believe the new governor needs to focus on?
To my mind, I think the two clear ones are really, making sure that inflation continues to be well managed, and second is how does he support growth. I think those were the two key elements of his focus, and I think you obviously have MPC set up now, and I think we'll have to see how that then focuses on taking these two agendas forward.
Dr. Jalan, RBI governor appointments are events that markets do move on, and markets were keeping a very keen eye on this one, and yet there's been a very quiet welcome by the markets, whether it's equities or the bond space or even the rupee, largely stable, very, very quiet there. Are they in a wait and watch mode really out there to see how Urjit Patel unfolds and evolves as a governor? Or do you believe it's a silence largely induced by continuity at RBI?
No, I mean, there is continuity and there is no problem there is no doubt about that. But so far as the markets are concerned, I mean, there are various factors which they may be taking into account. What's happening in the US, what's happening in London, what's happening here, and so on and so forth. And also how fast we have increased, not increased. So I would not put too much weight on, the statistics of the market, because this is not the only event which is taking place. Yes, RBI governor has an important role and so on and so forth, but let us not place, or tie up the markets with any actions being taken by the RBI in terms of either policy or in terms of what's happening in the macroeconomy. So what I am trying to get to you is essentially that what is happening in the market, just view it separately from the appointment of Dr. Patel.
From actually calling Raghuram Rajan the bond on the street and now the markets be in a wait and watch mode, I wonder if you can really divorce the RBI governor's appointment and what really happens in equity and the bond markets there and also the rupee, Dr. Jalan. So I will take the liberty then to shift this focus away from movement in the markets to really what the RBI governor is supposed to do, and that is price stability, that is to rein in inflation. And Mr. Munjal, if I may begin this leg of the discussion with you, Urjit Patel has a reputation. Yes, Raghuram Rajan was called an inflation warrior, but all of that stance was really based on Urjit Patel's own report, which talked about inflation targeting for the first time in India, which spoke about an inflation band, a flexible band that's 4 plus minus 2% here now. The larger question there is the street believes he's very hawkish. Does he need to undo himself right now?
I would imagine so. By the way, I'm not sure he's actually hawkish, by the way. He on the specific topic of inflation, he has said, this is the way to manage it. We have to target it better. We have to look at retail, because which is where the inflation actually hurts the consumer. And we have to have a very tight focus on it. He was also part of that group which designed the band, etc., which is actually sensible. I have to say that. But using only high interest rate as an instrument is something I think we have to be watchful of. And as I said, I do believe, because of his background and his experience, and also the government and industry wanting to moderate interest rates to be globally competitive, I think he would probably be more open to a finer balance here.
He'll be open to a finer balance, is what you're saying, perhaps with your fingers very crossed there, Mr. Munjal. But Dr. Jalan, let's bring this to you and let's analyze what really lies before Dr. Patel. Inflation at levels of 4%, of course, plus minus 2%, which takes the range from 2 to a 6%, is all very good. But how challenging is it going to be to meet those levels? Because food is almost 46% of that CPI basket. It's really out of the ambit of monetary policy. And the other big thing that we've still not talked about and which we've still not budgeted for is the inflationary impact of the GST if and when that rollout happens.
No, the one most important thing is the GST. Of that there is no doubt. It is an excellent reform. It will take some time to take place on the ground, but it's a very important reform. The second point I want to make to you is that I personally don't believe on a specific target in our country. You see, you have to do what needs to be done. I mean, if there is a drought, if there is a good monsoon, if the food prices are not increasing or increasing, I mean, the outlook may be different. So let us do the best we can, and hopefully the target regime that has been started now, because of the Monetary Policy Committee also, or the RBI, would be met over a period of time. But I don't have much to say on that.
It's interesting because you're opening another leg to that discussion, and so it's only fair to ask you, because you've been in that hot seat, Dr. Jalan, do you believe tweaking that range or making changes in the basket that we're targeting inflation to perhaps is warranted right now? You know, the pressures of why that inflation targeting came around or why that 4% was warranted are very different today. 2013 is when we were seeing inflation levels at 10%, and which is why that war was warranted, but things are very different today. Do you believe some amount of tweaking is required? Maybe look at core CPI, which is minus food and oil. I mean, I'm just trying to put a suggestion on the table here, Dr. Jalan.
No, but this is my personal view. This is not the RBI view or the government view or something, but as a citizen I can say that 0.1% or 0.2%, etc. is not very vital. It's the range which matters. In the sense that supposing instead of 6 we went to 10, then obviously it's a matter of great concern. And if instead of 6 we do 6.1 or 5.9 or 6.3 or 4.2, these are not vital statistics. You see what I mean? Therefore, my personal view again is that these very specific digital targets I don't believe in.
Fair point indeed. That's your personal view. But let's get the banker. Let's get someone who's got his skin in the game on this one. And Ajay Kanwal, the point that Dr. Jalan was making and the point that we were broadly alluding to, that the scenario in which inflation targeting began and the scenario in which, that ban was put in is very different today. It has all changed. A lot of advanced economies are actually beginning to give up inflation targeting, and still we are going behind it. It's a good thing because inflation does come back to haunt Indian economy, and it is going to erode the levels of growth that we would want to see. But how challenging will it be to meet that band? 4% is all good, but the band could be between 2 to 6%.
I'm sure, my own sense is probably we'll go through two phases. This phase is about providing continuity, providing confidence, and carrying on the good work that has happened in the past. And then is to reevaluate whether you really need to move some of your goalposts and relook at life in a different way. I would take that in two phases, and I'm sure the governor will have his own mind of how he would like to progress this.
I'm certain he will have his own mind, but I must do a follow-up here, because if Raghuram Rajan was the last independent governor to have taken the call all by himself on interest rates, and imagine the kind of pressure there would be on one single individual, I think Dr. Urjit Patel is going to be unique in the sense he is going to be the first to oversee a monetary policy committee, and most people believe it's going to be steered towards what the RBI internally wants and what the governor's view is. But all jokes set aside, the Monetary Policy Committee does take the pressure off the individual. What sort of a role do you expect Urjit Patel to play there? He is going to be the first man to oversee it, to have a casting vote there.
So let's take a step back. I think clearly if you look at where India is and you compare it to the rest of the world, right? Clearly it's a star in terms of performance, right? So we've got GDP at a very good pace, and we've got enough and more tailwind of what we can see India progressing, whether it's the Make in India programs, whether it's the service sector, whether it's the e-commerce businesses. So clearly India has opportunity. Now, we always had a focus on monetary policy, and I think the MPC will broaden this discussion on monetary policy plus what else. So not everything can be solved by monetary policy, and I think MPC will play a good role in having a broad discussion on how do we manage things like even inflation on a policy basis, other policy measures like fiscal measures, as well as then how do you support growth. So to my mind, it's a very good forum. It will bring things together, and we probably will see much more concentrated action on our issues and opportunities than probably we have seen in the past.
Mr. Munjal, being in New Delhi, you're well aware what a clamour there is to cut interest rates, and everybody who has any stake in the Indian economy wants a benign rate regime. But given the levels of inflation, do you believe the elbow room for that is considerably restricted right now? Whether the governor does it, whether the MPC does it, there's very little room for it.
I think he will have to play a dual role there as the RBI governor, looking at the focus on inflation, but also as the head of the as the head of this policy group, he will have to find a way to balance all of the interests together. I don't think that will be too much of a matter of choice, and I also don't think it will be too difficult for someone like him. You know, people have said he's taciturn, he's quiet, but the reality is he's a thinking individual, and he's known his mind, he's made up his mind on a number of issues which he's made known, not just once, but on repeat occasions. So I would imagine we will hear from him soon enough as to how he plans to strike this balance. And by the way, there's no argument that we need to contain inflation. I don't think anybody in government or industry has an argument with that. All people have said is, don't use this as a single instrument. You have other tools available, please do use them. But I also have to say, that's not going to be his only role. Inflation will be an important role, inflation management, but not the only role. Reserve Bank does have a number of other very, very critical and very important roles.
Dr. Jalan, you've been in the hot seat and you've done this before, given the latest reading on the inflation data. And I know you're not somebody who's a hawk on whether it's going to be 6% or 6.1 or 6.3. Is the elbow room, is the space for monetary easing considerably restricted today?
No, you know, I mean, what I'm saying is that's a decision which the RBI has to make, whether we can do a monetary easing or not, depending on what its view is in regard to inflation vis-a-vis, say, growth rate. And at the moment, what people are saying is that we need to, bump up growth a bit more because our industrial production is very low. I mean, our growth rate is high, but industrial production is what, 2.5%, 2.6%? And there is a lot of unemployment, and we need to increase jobs and so on. But how much weight you attach to this versus CPI inflation or whatever, I mean, I won't comment because I know that RBI has to make a decision, but I only hope that everybody will take into account the various factors and the trade-offs between one or the other, and take a view which is balanced, take a view which meets the needs of the economy as a whole. And I hope the RBI would do it, and let's wait and watch.
But Dr. Jalan, one of the things that the markets will wait and watch is very important. You know, one of the things that the market is waiting and watching is FCNR redemption, and he's going to make a debut to handle that. Is there a certain amount of anxiety there, or do you believe this could be business as usual?
Not at all. I mean, our foreign exchange reserves are at an all-time high. I mean, so why are you worried about it? You know, I mean, these redemptions have to take place, yes. But I mean, India's reputation is high among the emerging market economies. We are doing very well, and and our reserves are high. I mean, this is something which is unusual. You know, when I was in the RBI, etc., we were dealing with issues of balance of payments problems, crisis, and that reserves were not very high. So the decisions were tough decisions had to be taken. But today, what I believe is that we can handle these problems without too much of a problem, and surely RBI would do so.
So it's time to really switch gears and talk about the other issue. We've touched upon inflation, we've touched upon interest rates, and the other big issue, and I think that's going to be a litmus test for Urjit Patel, is going to be management of NPAs. Raghuram Rajan did show the holes that banks had and gaping holes that banks had in their balance sheets, Mr. Kanwal. He forced them to clean up. Urjit Patel has been a part of the decision making. Do you believe he can keep up that relentless fight?
The way I look at it is, you know, if you look at India the next 25, 50 years, it's very important to have a healthy banking system. And I think having a healthy banking system is both positive for economy and positive for all stakeholders. So having a focus on making sure the balance sheets are clean and there is good process and there's good governance on how banks are doing business is absolutely important. I think we have taken some good measures around bankruptcy law, around the NPA drive, and I do think that's absolutely the right thing to do. And you know, if you look at a longer term strong economy, having a strong banking system is powerful, and this is one of the key foundations.
All right, you would want him to keep up the fight, but Dr. Jalan, what's your view on this? You know, managing bad loans, bringing down those toxic assets is all very good. Should it be done at the same fervor with the same tenor that Raghuram Rajan was doing it?
No, but you tone down, tone up. I mean, I don't believe in that part. What I believe is that if you have NPAs which have increased over a period of time, say, last 2 years or 3 years, and we have started taking the measures now, then you have to allow it for some time if you want the economy to work properly to take place. NPAs must be reduced, yes. But you don't need a drastic action. You need action which is consistent with other goals of the economy. But yes, NPAs can be reduced. But whether they can be reduced over 3 months or 6 months or 1 year, we should be patient and try and get it done. The direction is more important than the magnitude in a particular period of time. You see what I mean?
Mr. Munjal, you want to come in on that? I know you're a member of the Indian industry, and you know there are cousins of yours from Indian industry that are clamoring, and you know Raghuram Rajan did make their life a little uncomfortable, but and bank cleanup is good. Nobody on the show is arguing whether it should happen or should not happen. It should definitely happen. Should it happen with the same relentless argument that it has been happening, or do you believe things need to be eased out a little, but then we risk no cleanup at all?
I think there is a need for us to help both clean up and support the banking system. If the overall economy is to grow, if infrastructure is to be built out, if more credit is to be made available to large, mid-sized and small industry, banks have got to get healthier. The balance sheets have to get healthier. So I don't think there can be any let up on that front, by the way. The only thing again is at what pace do you do this, and in what manner do you do this? Whether you take out, create good bank, bad bank has been done in some countries, or you encourage more ARCs. There are 2 or 3 methods available, but removing some of the non-performing assets from the bank's balance sheets and recapitalizing the bank's balance sheet, both are going to have to be done. Now, State Bank, in fact, is on a very bold, big move to consolidate a large number of its subsidiaries into itself. I think the RBI governor will have to oversee some of this as well as their big regulator. And again, he will have to walk a fine line between being part owner and being regulator. As you know, over the last some years, RBI has been trying to step back from being an owner of banks and taking on the role only of a regulator. So I think we have to be careful with that role as well, that the regulation does remain the primary role of the regulator.
All right, as we wrap this up, I must take this discussion away from, you know, monetary policy and NPAs and really close this with closing comments from each one of you. And Mr. Munjal, let's stick with you then. There was some amount of damage that was done after Raghuram Rajan decided to leave, and especially how it really came about, the Subramanian Swamy attack, the government not really standing up, and all of that. What's the appointment of Urjit Patel, ensuring continuity, getting somebody in with global credentials? Do you believe some amount of damage has been undone?
I think the damage, if that's what you call it, was quite temporary. There was a noise made, by the way. There's no doubt about that. It was made both within India and outside. I think the government took a sensible way of saying it looks like an economist is what is required at the head of this institution. So we will focus on an economist, but we want an economist who will be acceptable to all, to the community, to the bankers, to the economists, to the rating agencies, to government, to industry. And I think they've done a pretty good job in finding somebody with credentials which you can't fault. You know, LSE, Oxford, IMF, industry background, consulting background, experience in the RBI itself. So I think the search and doing this through a search committee itself was actually a very nice. This is probably the first RBI governor that I know of who was being appointed through a proper search process. So it clearly took a fair bit of effort, and I think that effort is paid off in this kind of selection.
Indeed. Ajay, I'll let you have a quick last word there. Raghuram Rajan had enjoyed this rock star status. You know, they said he's put sex back to the Sensex. They call him the born in the street. But Urjit Patel is somebody who's a quiet worker. He's not somebody who's given to very high-profile interviews, is not really in the limelight. Does the profile of the governor, he's far more low profile than his predecessor, does the profile of the RBI governor matter to global investors like yourselves, to big bankers like you?
See, I wouldn't contrast. What I would do is, I would say that the governor appointment has brought in the confidence, the continuity that India needs. He obviously has very strong exposure overseas and in working in the Reserve Bank. And India, where it is right now, certainly needs somebody like him. So my own sense is he will obviously leave his mark in his own right, and very well received appointment, I must say.
So, Dr. Jalan, because you've been the man in charge as the 20th governor, we'll let you have the final say on this show. And what's your take then? I know there have been governors in the past who've been low profile. There have been others who've been very high profile. What really works best on Mint Street? What kind of a person is required? Urjit Patel is somebody who's quiet. He's going to put his head down, do the job, perhaps not be in the limelight. But what really works best?
No, but high profile, low profile, I don't want to define all those figures. What works for the country is essentially a joint view of what needs to be done between the government and the Reserve Bank of India and other regulatory authorities. I mean, so what I'm saying at the moment is that you have to analyze the problems of the economy, be in consultation with the government, and take necessary action which is in consonance with what is acceptable and doable. So far as the public policy is also concerned. So I am saying that there are different, different parts of it. I mean, this is in any situation, and the economy is a very important issue. But even if you are talking in the media and you are using the camera, then you have to, yes, have the right tone, right thing, right lights, and so on and so forth. But there has to be a choice, has to be made. So what I am saying essentially is that this problem can be handled, and we are in a strong position. There are certain issues which have been there for some time, and that may require more time than just a very abrupt change in the NPA situation, but we should move in the right direction, and we are doing so just now.
All right, indeed, we are moving in the right direction. They've got an economist in charge and somebody who is going to steer the economic ship, at least from the monetary point of view, over the next 3 years. But thank you very much, Dr. Bimal Jalan, Mr. Ajay Kanwal, and Mr. Sunilkant Munjal for joining us on this edition of The Chosen One. We really appreciate you taking time out.
It's a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.